Kim Kothari is back with us, and there's one Manchester City fan that I know that every season wants to tell you that they're not going to have a good season, things are going to go wrong. Well, you are finally correct. Talk us through your thinking.
Every season, completely incorrect. About a month ago, I called this run of form. I think it was pretty easy to see, to be honest. I think City got quite lucky, particularly against like Brentford and Fulham, where they both won. And I think what we've seen over the last 5 games is well expected, to be honest. I think it's a bit of a lazy narrative as well to say that it's just to do with Rodri. I think City have got a pretty ageing squad. De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Gundogan, Kovacic, all over 30. It was bound to happen. The amount of football that City have played over the last 3 or 4 years, been in every competition almost until the end. I think the players have played more than anyone else in European football. I think this was inevitable. It was bound to happen. You've obviously got the court case hanging over us. But before this, the last couple of months, there's been a question marks about Guardiola's future. That looks to be a bit secure. But I think all of those factors together have just led to this slightly poor run of form. And you've also got to factor in the fact that people mention City's really enormous squad. I think that's always been a myth. I think there's 15, 16 players that City have that Pep Guardiola can rely on. Over the last 4 weeks, 8 or 9 of them have been missing to injury. No team in the world can compete with that. It's a really, really difficult thing to do. I know City won't get much sympathy because of how much money they've spent and the embarrassment of riches that they have in the starting 11 and the bench. But when you're dealing with an injury crisis like that, these results are bound to happen.
One of the points you mentioned is Guardiola there, potentially unsure whether he was going to stay. He's decided to stay now. So that's one thing ticked off. From the team sheet I can see in front of me, De Bruyne could potentially be fit. And obviously, as you mentioned, there are injuries, so it could be Ake and Akanji and Lewis in the back line. And then you skipped over the Rodri point. But I do look at this, and you look at City's record without Rodri, and it's pretty certain that is a really big reason as to why they're faltering.
Yeah, the numbers are stark when you look at City with and without Rodri. It's night and day. And like you said, Kim, there's not going to be much sympathy for City because they have had won the last 4 Premier League titles. But I think it would be an indictment on the rest of the Premier League if City seamlessly made it through this period of time without a Ballon d'Or winner. He's so important. And so you expect if a player like that goes down, the team's going to struggle. And if they didn't struggle, I think the rest of the league would be in trouble because it's like, who stops this City team? And they have struggled. And in midfield, they struggle to deal with transitions. You look at the Brighton game where Brighton Kweku in transition. You look at the Bournemouth game as well. It's a City team that looked very different to previous years. And like you mentioned, an aging team, Gundogan doesn't look like himself. Bernardo Silva doesn't look like himself. Haaland's been a bit patchy since a really strong start to the season in terms of goals. Physically, Kevin De Bruyne doesn't look like Kevin De Bruyne. No doubt about it, the City will kick into gear at some point. I don't think that 14, 15 game winning run will come, but losing 4 games in a row is not going to happen again for City this season. But this is a Spurs side that have tended to be City's bogey team this season or over the last couple of years. And so it'll be very interesting to see what Guardiola does in terms of solutions in midfield. We all thought there'd be something tricky. He might put a player that we didn't expect in that midfield, but it's been pretty conventional and it hasn't worked. And so for Man City, they need to find solutions, but based on the experience they've got in the squad, based on history, I think City will bounce back. Whether that be enough to win the Premier League title, time will tell. But they are a side that are not in crisis right now, but are in a bit of turmoil.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned the transition because we actually had a lot of chats last year, and I said that was our main weakness last year. It's our main weakness this year, and you can never question Pep Guardiola because of what he's done, but like, we're not football analysts, we're not football coaches, but I watch every City game and I think we're just really susceptible on the break. And it doesn't seem like anything has changed to quash that. That seems to be our problem every single game. And as you mentioned, Spurs are a side who you do not want to play because the fast counter, the way that Maddison can break through that middle and then they basically got 4-on-2 situation. But the problems have been the same for City last year as they are this year. I don't think that Rodri is the be-all and end-all factor. I think you've got a lot bigger issues than that. I think you look at the back line, you look at the left-back, okay, Guardiola's a fantastic footballer. He's not a left-back. You look at right-back, Kyle Walker, as much as I love him, I think he's the best right-back in history. He's finished now. He cannot defend. He doesn't have the pace to recover. Rico Lewis is small, probably not the best defender either. So there are problems there. Akanji, a fantastic ball-playing centre-back, sometimes gets beaten in the air quite easily. John Stones, very injury-prone. So I think there are much bigger issues on the pitch than just Rodri. This team, 2 years ago, without Rodri, would be doing far better than they are doing right now.
I think the midfield point, you both made it there about obviously City's problems in wide areas. You mentioned Akanji in the air. I read a stat the other day that Spurs are the lowest ranked team in going long to their striker. And one thing I align Solanke with is someone who's really dominant in the air, holds the ball up really well. I'd be looking at that as an area where Spurs could get a lot of advantages. But that midfield area is really interesting. We've got Bernardo and Kovacic potentially playing as a midfield pair. Spurs' attacking pair of Maddison and Kulusevski. Maddison's not been anywhere near the level he was last season at times, but Kulusevski's come on. I look at that and I think City's biggest weakness is midfield. Spurs' biggest strength is probably in midfield as well. How do Spurs contain Man City, but then also go after them?
I think it's going to be a bit of a basketball with the game because of the midfields and how they've set it up. Kulusevski will have to have a huge game for Spurs. He's been big for them this season. He has that physicality, but also that guile. And I know Andrew's been under a lot of pressure this season, but one of his best moves is moving Kulusevski into a central position, and we're really seeing the best of him. I want to focus, though, on Spurs' defence because Dragusin went down with an injury during the international break for Romania. Romero went down with an injury for Argentina. We expect Van Ven to be out for this game as well. At the time of recording, I haven't heard the press conference, but if it's a case of you're moving a Ben Davies there, or maybe even trying an Archie Gray at centre-back, he played there in pre-season, then you're going to have big problems because this is Erling Haaland. Despite the fact that people saying he struggled, he is still the top goal scorer in the Premier League, the best goal scorer the Premier League's ever seen, and he'll have an absolute field day if it's the likes of an Archie Gray or a half-fit Romero in that defence, or if the Dragusin's half-fit as well. It'll be a problem. And for Spurs, the personnel in their defence has always impressed me, but the way they work as a tandem hasn't. And I think that Haaland will have a field day if they're not on their P's and Q's.
The problem for me, like looking at it, I agree if Haaland gets the ball, yes. I think part of the problem that City have had is getting the ball to him.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do you think KDB plays if he does play in this game? Do you think he plays a bit further up to get Haaland the ball off from that support?
KDB won't be the KDB you think he will be. He's not that player anymore anyway, and he's just come back from injury. He's not going to be that guy for a few weeks. It always takes him a while to warm up. I don't think that's going to be that much of a problem. I think the main issue for City, as you mentioned, is going to be in that midfield area because Bernardo Silva has had a very poor season this year and he doesn't have the legs anymore. Kovacic doesn't have the legs. He's not creative. If Gundogan goes in there, he certainly doesn't have the legs. So they're just going to get overrun. You mentioned Spurs' defence, which obviously is going to be an issue. If they are having a makeshift back four against Erling Haaland, that will create problems. City haven't got the ball to Haaland in the last 5 games, apart from pretty much once against Southampton. So if that's the case again today, it doesn't really matter who Spurs have in the back four. All that matters is whether City's midfield can actually cope with Spurs' midfield and move the ball forward, which they haven't been able to do the last few games.
But that's also when I then look at the players you mentioned that are out of form. One name you haven't mentioned is Foden. Because at this moment in time, I'm saying, if you can't get the ball to Haaland, someone in your midfield has to go and get it. You just mentioned Bernardo. I think he's been pretty average this season. But then you've also got the problem that the ball isn't moving from defence to midfield to attack as fluidly as it was. So Haaland is all good and well, and there's been this recent demand on why isn't Haaland dropping in to get the ball? He doesn't play that way. So if KDB is a shadow of the KDB that we know, which I think he is, and we've seen very little of him this season, how do they get the ball into that area in the first place?
It's difficult, and I think Pep in the pre-season made a decision to adopt a new, not philosophy, but a new way of attacking this year, and it's through the wingers out wide, through Doku and through Savinho. Hasn't really worked. I think the most exciting Pep Guardiola team I've seen is the 18-19 team where you had Sterling, you had Aguero in the middle, and they attacked from out wide. I think Doku and Savinho are very good players. Obviously, they're in their infancy when it comes to their Premier League careers, and they haven't really found their feet on a consistent basis. But that's how City get the ball to their front man. Well, that's how they're trying to get their ball to their front man. It's just not working consistently. And like you mentioned, players who play more centrally in KDB and Phil Foden have not been in the lineup consistently this season. So out wide is where they're going to try and get their joy, but I just don't know if they can do it on a consistent basis against Spurs fullbacks, who I do think are very good in the Doggy and Porro.
The problem is with those two who are on the sheet here, Doku and Savinho, they both like too many touches. They love having the ball at their feet. Savinho, I think, has been electric this year. Hasn't scored, hasn't posted many assists either, so numbers are lacking. Jeremy Doku, I think, flatters to deceive a little bit.
Oh, really?
I think there's he's been memed a little bit on social media, hasn't he? Like Doku when he comes up against a 30-year-old defender, when he comes up against a 20-year-old defender. He is a different player, and I think it's all well and good attacking from the flanks, and it's all well and good having a flash bit of skill or having a little bit of pace. But if you can't do anything with the ball when you're in that position, it doesn't really matter. And Erling Haaland has been starved of service, especially over the last...
Do you think Haaland has to do more.
No, of course not. Because Haaland is playing exactly the same way he played when he got 53 goals a year. He's exactly the same player who came second in the Ballon d'Or when City won the treble. I don't think Haaland needs to do anymore. I think we need to get Jack Grealish fit because him and Haaland seem to have quite a special connection. He actually gets the ball into him a lot more often than not. And we just need everyone else to just pick up their levels a little bit. They're still good players. Gundogan, okay, fine. I don't know who they gave us back from Barcelona. Does not seem like the same player. But like they're aged, but they should have more in the legs than they've shown over the last four games. And I don't know if it's a mentality thing. I think it's more likely just a massive fatigue thing. But I think this is a good test because a lot of them pulled out of international duty. They should have had a week, 2 weeks off now. They've got a Spurs team who, as you mentioned, have a bit of a makeshift back four. Also a Spurs team who play pretty hell to the leather. There's going to be a lot of space in the game. This is like a good opportunity for City to say like, oh, we are still in the title race, but the players really need to perform.
Really quickly, I know we're talking about the X's and O's here, but if you take like a macro view of it, it's hard, and there's a reason why nobody won the title 4 years in a row, let alone 5, which is what City are going for this season. It's very, very difficult to go again and again and again with the same core group of players. And I think that's what City are suffering from this year. And like I said at the beginning, I think it would have been an indictment if City would have made it through seamlessly through this period without their Ballon d'Or winner winning every single game.
Yeah.
There's going to be an inevitable drop-off. And this has left the opportunity open for a lot of other teams that are chasing. Don't think the points total will be as high this season. And I think the City will be chasing for the majority of the season as opposed to the previous seasons where they've led.
Interesting. I don't know the difference between 4 and 5. If you win 4 and you're motivated, I wonder why you can't get motivated for 5.
I think because 4 have never been done before. I know 5's also never been done before, but you've already broken a record. You've won the treble this season before. It is hard.
Of course. Yeah, I guess it's like you've done the thing that was impossible.
Yeah.
Now you just got to do something.
But I do wonder if Pep Guardiola extending gives that little bit of fire in the belly. I'm hoping that's the case.
I wondered whether they did that because of that right now.
Yeah.
Like whether they were going, it's the break point.
I think they probably would have waited a little bit longer.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, we have been speaking for like 10 minutes, and the fact is that City do have 8 or 9 injured players.
Yeah.
I know there's not a huge amount of sympathy, but obviously that has an impact. But yeah, they haven't been good enough over the last 4 games. This is a tough one.
Score predictions?
2-2.
Oh, you nicked my one. 2-2, Desmond.
I'm gonna go 2-1 City. They can't go this many games stuck.